it's clear that there are some significant consequences of modernism and the modern age and the industrial age that are now becoming quite catastrophic in certain cases. If you look across to the left-hand side, the biodiversity loss exceeds all expectations. We're likely to lose in the next 30 years around about 30% of the entire biodiversity on the planet. It's absolutely catastrophic, and it's rapid. So once one tumbles, another one tumbles, and it accelerates. It's called positive reinforcement, and unfortunately it's not a positive story. It's positive because it influences and informs another piece. A lot of this is still trying to be understood, but we know already that we're exceeding the limits on climate change as a result of our excessive activity around industrialisation for the last 200 years. So the anthropomorphic effect is more than the natural effect. That suggests that we have to then rein ourselves in or redefine ourselves and do things differently because we are no longer a benign race on the planet. What we do affects everything else. Whereas for the last few millennia, it hasn't been like that. And as colleagues have said all day, there are other clear consequences of the lifestyles that we're adopting that are having negative effects on us personally and on our societies. So it isn't just the fact that nature is in trouble as a result of human activity. It's also the fact that we're in trouble because of the human activity that we're encouraging people to live like. And if we don't start thinking about that, both for our own selves and our families and our communities, we really are on a precipice towards complete and utter meltdown. So that's a tough lesson because we've become so encultured into that globally. But people have been noting it for a long time. I don't know if people are familiar with Thomas Berry's work. Tom wrote The Sacred Universe and a number of other books. Wonderful guy. And I had an amazing opportunity in the 90s to meet him, and we ended up scribbling letters to each other for months on end. And one of the little things he wrote in a note I had was all our sciences and technologies and all our social institutions become dysfunctional if the natural life systems cease to function. See you later, Paul. Bye. What a message. That was his last ever letter to me. It's a bit like his Louis Pasteur moment on a personal level. But it says it really in terms of the crisis, that we have to think differently. We have to align ourselves differently. So what do we do? How do we conceptualise it? Well, Stuart Brand's work over the last 40 years has been quite progressively arguing for a new thinking around environmentalism. And his recent book, The Whole Earth Discipline, sort of is summed up, I guess, in those three things: scale, scope, and stakes. It's another piece of life work, if you like. He's coming into a point where he's kind of drawing threads and themes from 40-odd years of work in this area. The scale is planetary. The scope is centuries. Nobody in this room will see us getting out the other side of the crisis around climate change and environmental degradation, nor will our children, nor will our children's children. It's an intergenerational agenda. So it suggests that what we begin to do is learn from the indigenous communities around the world who have always held that view, that what we do should have 4, 5, 6 generations consideration on it before we do very much. You know, think really long term. Think about the consequences. And suddenly we're in a very different sort of mindset because we're actually looking differently at time and our relationship to time and space. And the last point Brand makes is that this is civilization at stake, and that's not unusual for the human race. We've been here before. Look back in history, you can see civilizations that catastrophically collapsed, most of the time around food and water. Look at the Mayans, for example. Okay, so there's something in the nature of the relationship we've got with the environment that we live in and the ways in which we build that relationship with each other to understand that becomes quite important, quite critical for us to think about at this sort of time. It's not something we leave for our children. It's a thing we need to, in a sense, act upon in this present moment.